Hello, and before I go any further, I'd like to thank everybody that helped get this channel across the 200 subscriber mark. We now officially have as many subscribers as Maggot Stomp has had stab wounds. This is The Average Poser, a channel where I like to make half-ass book reports about metal bands in an attempt to educate myself and hopefully become a little bit less of a poser, and hopefully you too will become a bit less of a poser as well. Today we have a fairly straightforward, almost obligatory metal YouTube video about my top 5 favorite all-time albums of all time ever. And this is legitimately going to be my top 5. It's not going to be a joke video where I just list 4 Weird Al albums and top it off with Eddie's $1 Million Cook-Off soundtrack at number 1. Although those might sincerely belong in the honorable mention category. To begin, let's travel back to the early 2000s, when I was visiting some relatives in California. My aunt, it was around my birthday time, she jokingly gifted me, Avril Lavigne's now infamous album, Lego My Ego, and she kind of gave it to me as a joke. The joke being my aunt's maiden name was also Lavigne, and she was also from Canada. So a good time laughing about that was had by all. But as an avid Radio Disney listener, I actually was pretty excited to have my very own little collection of music on a digital donut, and thus my love for the concept of the album was born. For this list, I had one criteria and one criteria only. How many times have I gone back to listen to this whole album? Not just a few songs on the album, but the whole album in its entirety. And interestingly, I find that most of these albums are in genres where I don't care for a whole lot of bands from that scene, but this album from this band, for some reason, really stuck out to me. And the first example of that is number 5. Scene change. Gaze and shoe black is a genre that I respect, but rarely holds my attention throughout the span of an album. So what is it about Arson that is so special to me? It's kind of hard for me to put that into words, so let me be a professional here and just plagiarize from an existing review that I found on Metal Archives. In the third paragraph of his review, Bastardhead notes how brutally long every song is without feeling truly drawn out. And that's something that I think we all value in a song, is its ability to pull us into an experience without looking at a clock to see when it ends, like you're probably doing with this video. And the longer the song, the harder that this can be to achieve. The sound that Harakiri for the Sky has developed manages to be pretty emotionally powerful over the course of some very long tracks without losing my attention. I especially love Fire Walk With Me, which is a 9-minute epic that appears to be about overcoming addiction, which is a common theme throughout the album. Gives me goosebumps every time I hear the line, I was never really here, but the streets all seem to know my name. Talking about the drums on the album, Bastardhead notes that it lends a frantic dissonance to the experience, changing what would have otherwise sounded like I'm dying and I'm very sad into I'm dying and I don't want to die, please help me. And I feel like that's a great way to summarize what this band does to their genre for me. Bastardhead also notes that the album, despite its strengths, can be a bit repetitive, especially in the second half, and that many people could listen to 3 songs on shuffle for the same experience. And I can see that, but I am ranking this only as number 5 after all. But when I revisit this album, the emotion and the atmosphere keeps me engaged despite some of the overly long tracks. And atmosphere is going to be a word that I say multiple times in this video going forward, especially in the case of number 4. I don't think I need to say a lot about the lore and the background of this album because Ganilok already made an album, a YouTube video about it that is better than any mere mortal could have ever created. But I will say in my own words why it's special to me. As I said, atmosphere, atmosphere, atmosphere. If most shoegaze albums don't keep my attention, then why in the piss grave is it that Bell Witch is able to keep my attention over the course of 20-30 minute songs? Well, simply put, there's just, I don't know. I don't remember exactly the first time that I listened to it, but I remember it sounded like nothing I had ever quite heard before. It was like the experience of being stuck in a dark cellar with something that you dread in the corner, but it's also so fascinating that you can't look away from the horror. I've often described it as the soundtrack to sleep paralysis. I actually think the first time that I thought about listening to Bell Witch was because of all the memes for Mirror Reaper, the album cover for Mirror Reaper, but Mirror Reaper doesn't really grip me the way that Longing does, or any other Funeral Doom album, really. There was another really good video that I saw, and I don't remember it right now off the top of my head. It just occurred to me, but if I can find it, I will put it in the description or something, about how well Bell Witch is able to raise and release tension. It's not just There's like a certain sequence where you're expecting a certain note to come and it just never does, and it just kind of keeps you on the edge of your seat the whole time. And then all the while you've got these vocals that are both angelic and demonic, switching sides, kind of like dangerous but ethereal. I highly recommend listening to it alone in the woods, especially if you find an abandoned cabin somewhere. For album number 3, we also have some, I guess you would say, ethereal elements, but they're less the trapped in a cellar kind and more so the catchy poppy vibe. I know what some of you may be thinking, The Birthday Massacre, isn't that the band that made songs for goth children on Vampire Freaks in 2006? Yes, they are, and they're awesome, fuck you. I was aware of them for a long time, but I didn't really start listening to them until about 2016 when they popped up on my recommendations on Pandora. Yes, I still listened to Pandora in 2016, fuck you. I was immediately reeled in by their blending of synthwave, darkwave, nu metal wave, wave, and wave, and they have consistently been topping my Spotify end-of-year little recap thing ever since. Imagine if the theme song to Stranger Things just had the catchiest chorus you had ever heard, and then they made 11 albums out of it. And for songs with The Birthday Massacre, it kind of goes back and forth like the vocals on Bell Witch. You've got those like really high energy, almost dance numbers like Shallow Grave, and then you've got the slower, more ethereal. I keep using that word. I just looked it up like 4 minutes ago, and I don't remember if I'm even using it right. Songs like Superstition and Beyond, which aren't even on the album Pins and Needles, now that I think about it. And actually, you will notice that there was an asterisk next to choice number 3. That's because even though I think Pins and Needles is like my third favorite album, but The Birthday Massacre kind of just varies. Their albums are a little bit different, and you see this evolution where they were more closer to nu metal at the beginning of their career, and now they've become more of the little bit softer, heavier synth tone, I guess you would say. And I find myself kind of going between Pins and Needles being my favorite, and then their more recent albums like Superstition and Fascination, pretty well set to dethrone it. Pins and Needles is still my favorite for now, but you know, if you're into 80s core shit, all the albums should work for you. In October of 2011, I walked into a venue to see Skeleton Witch and Devil Driver. There was also a band there from Taiwan called Chthonic, of whom I had never heard before, and of whomst I had no expectations. I walked out of that venue as a lifelong fan. Takasago Army was their newest album at the time, and it is a doozy. I guess if you had to categorize it, it would maybe be black and death metal, throw in the word melodic in there, and of course you've got all the traditional Taiwanese folk elements, most notably the use of an eru, I think that's how you pronounce it. And in 2011, I heard nothing like that. And it wasn't just smattered here and there either. You know, the eru solos are just as good as the guitar solos. And not only do I find the music worth revisiting again and again and again, just for how beautiful it is, but the subject matter is just incredibly real. I'm just going to lift this part direct quotes from Wikipedia. The title is a reference to the Takasago volunteers in the Imperial Japanese Army, recruited from the Taiwanese Aboriginal tribes during World War II. The album's cover art depicts a World War II Takasago Army volunteer marking himself as Shadiq, an act forbidden by the Japanese, although he is now serving in the Japanese military. This illustrates the conflict many of these soldiers had with their identity as Japanese soldiers and their heritage as Taiwanese Shadiq warriors. The album seeks to showcase the quest of the Taiwanese for values and dignity as human beings through the tragic roles of the Taiwanese during World War II. Now obviously I cannot comment on the experience of being Taiwanese, but as a foreign listener knowing about the tensions between China and Taiwan as they are today, the stories and the themes of this album feel like they're equally relevant today. I would recommend giving a listen to Chthonic's entire collection. I especially like this acoustic collection. Features some songs from Takasago Army and Boutique, stripped down to the original acoustic way that they were written. I think they once read somewhere what it is that they write them all as acoustic folk songs before turning them into metal songs, and it's pretty neat to see that process. And kudos to lead singer Freddie Lim for not only fronting the band, but for founding his own political party and being a member of the Taiwanese Congress. I think he's giving Bruce McPilot Fencer a pretty good run for his money as the most interesting man in metal. Now when it comes to album number 1, I want to go all the way back to my formative years of first listening to rock and metal. The mid-2000s, a time when nu metal was on the rise. It was the peak of System of a Down, the decline of Green Day, the commercial peak of Green Day, and I have to give some partial credit here to Linkin Park. Meteora was the first CD that I ever bought with my own money, and there's also a number of other honorable mentions that I would like to bring up here as well. But only one album really stands out as still being unskippable the way that it was when I first listened to it way back in 2000 and something. And it powerfully influenced the kind of music that I look for today. That atmosphere, the claustrophobic, atmospheric, melodic, yet crushing emotional roller coaster sound, making me feel not like I'm just in my room listening to music, but in an entirely different space. Now I know what some of you might be thinking. Volume 3? That's not even the best Slipknot album. What kind of a poser are you? Well, I'm an average one. It's the title of the channel. Now I do respect the self-titled debut and Iowa for being what they are. They're amazing albums. And it should be noted that my first Slipknot album was Volume 3, so I might have some first album bias here, but going back to creating tension and easing it and then rebuilding it, I love the way that Slipknot seamlessly connects all of these songs. You've got the slower tension-building ones like Prelude and Circle, and they move seamlessly into the heavier numbers like Welcome and Opium of the People. I really do think that this is the best album that Slipknot has ever pulled off. From a musical, I guess, creative standpoint. I mean, other albums later on would also kind of do that thing with soft songs and heavier songs, changing the tension as it went, but I don't think they nailed it quite the way they did in Volume 3. Like, what's that one? In All Hope Is Gone, the song Snuff. It's a really good song, but I don't feel like it's weaved into the fabric of the song before and after it. It just kind of shows up, it sounds like a Stone Sour song, and then it's done and you move on. Also, I need to talk about how embarrassing I find the lyrics for Butcher's Hook. So all in all, for me, I think every Slipknot album has its moments, but Volume 3 is the one that, as a single album, as a whole collection, it's the one that is the most unskippable. And sometimes it feels like it's just one song. Anyways, that's it. I'm going to go back to the gray shirt guy, jacket dude, because he already filmed the outro. Well, anyways, that's the video. Thank you for sticking by and watching it. And, you know, I'll spin some honorable mentions in the credits here. And make sure that you subscribe and follow me all over the place in order to become a bit less of a poser. And, yeah, that's it. Poser over.